Hello, everyone. Welcome to the New York Emergency Medicine Student Council's VSLO and Away rotation event. For those of you who don't know us, we're an organization comprised of students from across the state, and we put on programming sort of like this, just get information out to students who are interested in emergency medicine. So if you like what you see tonight and you want to see more from us, we'll talk about it later, but you can follow us on Instagram. You can try and keep in touch. Just keep an eye out for any emails that we will send to your interest groups at your schools. And, hopefully you'll be able to enjoy other things that we put on. Um, and just as a heads up, everyone just please be mindful of your microphones. Please keep them off just so nobody gets distracted. And the slides that we're going to have tonight, as well as the recording of this Zoom meeting, that will be shared with all of you sometime in the next few days when we get it all sort of wrangled. Um, so, oh, by the way, I'm Brendan. I'm the chair of the NYE MSC. But I am not really running the show tonight because I am a measly third year. Instead, we have two of our other board members, Fung and Eamon, who are going to be running this tonight and telling you all about how to apply to VSLO and or apply to your programs through VSLO and how to do great when you do your away rotations. So without further ado, I don't think I'm forgetting anything, but let me know. Fung and Eamon, you can go ahead and introduce yourselves and get started, and I will get the PowerPoint up.
Thank you so much, Brendan. First of all, you're not a measly third year. You're our fearless leader. So thank you so much. Hey guys, I'm Eamon. I'm a fourth year med student at Ross University. And I actually did my third and fourth year rotations over in Connecticut. And my EM, we'll talk about it in a minute, but my EM rotations I ended up doing at St. Barnabas in the Bronx and Vassar Brothers up in Poughkeepsie.
Hi, everybody. I'm Fong. I'm a fourth year. I go to school at Toro Common Harlem. Um, I am a fourth year. I'm applying emergency medicine this cycle. We can get into like where the sub-Is is and everything, but at any point, if you guys have any questions, we want to make this like interactive. So feel free to like unmute and ask us questions. And then in the end, we'll have some time and you guys can just ask us like whatever you want. You know, we're kind of fresh in the application cycle, so I'm sure we can answer like whatever questions you have about interviewing, applying EM, and all of those fun things. So we can get started. Do you want to start, Eamon, or do you want me to start?
Yeah, sure, I can start. Also, just a quick thing, quick FYI, there's going to be a couple of QR codes in here, so if you want to have your phone ready to take a snapshot of those, or like screenshot it for later. All right, so our agenda. So today we're going to talk about why away rotations are important, how to get them, the different types of slows. I'm sure you guys have heard about like slow, oh slow, and so, like random things. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about things to consider when choosing an away program, how many to apply to, um, how many you should do, how many you should reject. Um, and then, like some programs actually offer interviews during the away rotations. Some tell you that you'll have to wait until like the actual interview season. And then we'll give you some tips to crush your aways, talking about like personal experience that we've had. And again, along the way, if you have any questions, drop them in the chat. If one of us isn't presenting, we'll definitely get to them as quickly as we can. All right.
All right, so we're ready for the next slide. So why are away rotations important, right? So, if you're like me and you go to a DO school, you don't really have like a home institution that you're kind of like, this is my safety, like these are the people that I know, and like this is kind of where I was in my third year. So slows kind of give you this, away rotations kind of give you this, opportunity to impress the people that you're working with and hopefully land you like that really great residency spot that you want. And when you do away rotations, you should always ask for a slow because they give residency programs objective evaluations of your performance. So a lot of times these are going to be quantitative rather than like, you have a great experience with like a family med person and they write you like a lovely letter that's like Brendan is like the best person ever. He's so nice. He's lovely. But that's not really like what SLOs are for. They're kind of objective ways and they're quantitative ways for them to compare you with other rotators during that time. We can go to the next slide. So a SLO stands for a standardized letter of evaluation. It's, like I said, very quantitative and it is more objective. So at the end of the SLO, you're probably going to be split into either your top 10%, your top third, middle third, or lower third. But there's a lot of different types of SLOs. So in the next slide, we'll kind of go over what kind of SLOs there are. So there's the E-SLO, which is like the SLO when you're thinking about like, when I'm applying to residency, like what do I really need? Like emergency medicine really weighs heavily on the E-SLO. You essentially can't really apply to EM residency without it. This is going to be written by a faculty member at an EM residency program. They're usually written by a group, including like the program director, the APD, or the clerkship director. These are probably going to be composed of, your end of shift evaluation cards and will include comments on like your performance, your history taking, your H&Ps, procedural skills, and things like that. Um, there are other types of SLOs called like non-residency based SLOs. So this will be, for those like freestanding EDs. So it'll be for EM faculty that won't have a direct like EM residency training program at that hospital. You can also get something called a subspecialty SLO. So that's going to be, your EM elective. So say you did, two sub-Is and you're like done with your sub-I season, but you still want to do emergency medicine. You're still interested in the elective. So you'll do some ultrasound, some PEM, some talk, some wilderness medicine. These will be your subspecialty SLOs. And then you'll also have like off-service SLOs, which are called OSLOs. So this is going to be, letters of recommendation from specialists and doctors who are not necessarily emergency medicine physicians. And you can, I don't have that SLO. I don't have an OSLO, but I'm sure it will add to your application if you do have one that can be very personable and a very, from someone that knows you really, really well. So next slide. Okay.
Okay, good. Okay, so one of the biggest pieces of advice I got over the last couple of years was if you're gonna play the game, know what the game is, right? So, EMRA and their student advising guide, which is that QR code there, um, they actually give you the template for what a slow looks like, right? So, like before you do your rotation, you can quickly have a look at this and see what are the things that they're looking out for, and how you, as your personal self, can maximize some of those traits about yourself that maybe you're not the best at. Um, that way you're able to just adapt pretty well, right? And then again, this is supposed to be standardized, so that way like it's able to compare apples to apples. There's like in part C they compare how likely the applicant is going to be a top 10% applicant on the rank list, top third, middle third, bottom third, and then like DNR, like don't rank. And then there's a written component in part D, so that way like they're still able to express a lot about what you were able to show during that month of your rotation. Um, and again, so like we were talking about how the difference between an E-SLO and a non-residency SLO. So with that ranking process, like in Part C, this is the standard E-SLO because they have residents, so that's how they're going to be able to say where you will fall on their theoretical rank list. Whereas for like the non-residency SLO, they kind of won't be able to fill that part out, so that one won't even be on their version. Okay, next slide.
All right. So when should you ask for a SLO and how do you like go about getting one? So if you are doing a sub-I at an institution that has a residency program, most of the time the clerkship director will give you an orientation and it's kind of expected that if you are applying emergency medicine, they know that they will have to produce you a SLO at the end. And you should like only request one per rotation. And usually the SLOs are comprised of like Like if you do emergency medicine, you'll do like 12 shifts or 14 shifts, and then each shift, at the end of your shift, you'll get some feedback. You'll give them like a request for an evaluation, and it'll be like a culmination of all of those evaluations that you get. If you get an attending that really likes you, like ask them to fill out your evaluation for that day, but then altogether they'll create a package for you at the end, and you'll only get really just the one. Um, should you get SLOEs from non-residency programs? You can, but they will not be weighed as heavily as like the quintessential E-SLO that Iman was talking about. And then can we ask for SLOEs from EM preceptors that we worked with during second year? Personally, I think that, you always want to like put your best foot forward. So if you feel like you are a super strong clinician from the bat and that you're super impressive, then you should get your SLO from whenever you feel like you did the best. Just keep in mind that you're going to be compared to third years and fourth years. So it's not necessarily anything against you, but clinically, it might be a better idea for you to wait until you're clinically stronger to request a SLO. And then can you still submit a SLO from an October EM after ARIS is submitted? I would say that this is like a yes or no. It kind of depends on how many SLOs or how many letters of recommendations you kind of have already. Um, Based on my application cycle, I was told not to submit more than three. So, if you only have one, it can't hurt to have another one. But maybe if you already have three, it's maybe not the best idea, and it won't carry as much weight if you add another one. Okay, so then next we're going to talk about applying to OAs. I applied to five OAs because I really didn't know what I wanted, and so I wanted to like spread my wings and go very far and go to a bunch of places. But I think in the end, the advice that I was told was that you should always submit the SLO from your home institution. So wherever you did your emergency medicine rotation. You should definitely submit that one, and then not to exceed three SLOs. And then the give like the bit about how many programs to apply to, it kind of depends. So if you already kind of know like what programs you're interested in, you should definitely apply to those and reach out to them as early as you can. But also like if you're not really sure, then maybe you should apply more broadly. But then also keep in mind that if you accept the SLO, first off, you have to pay money to do VSLO, but then secondly, you have to think about like, if you do accept this rotation and it's like kind of far away, you'll have to think about like how much it costs, and like thinking about all of those things is really important too. And then we'll talk about like how you handle getting an acceptance and stuff. Um, I think then we can go to the next slide. So yeah, applying to Waze, the timeline. We received a question on the Google form about like when it's best to do an away. Usually July to September is like the prime time to do your sub-I. Ideally, you want to finish your sub-I like right where ERAs kind of open so that they can kind of give you that quick turnaround and submit your SLOs. You ideally want to have at least two SLOs by the time that you submit your application for residency. I think someone asked if July was like a weird time to do a SLO. July is probably the best time to do a SLO, to be honest, because most intern programs are doing their like intern boot camp. So it'll just be you in the emergency department. And you'll be very strong and you'll be super helpful. So personally, I don't know if others feel the same way, but I think doing a sub-I in July is expected and you should definitely strive to do one. Um, so programs are kind of on a rolling basis on VSLO. So you can reach out as early as January of the same year. You'll get like VSLO tokens that'll kind of like unlock your ability to apply to these programs. And just keep in mind that they're first come, first serve. So if you kind of have an idea of like a rotation that you're really interested in, a place that you really want us to do a sub-I at, I would personally just even like email like the coordinator and just ask them like, hey, like I'm interested, I want to come here, like when should I apply? But most will start popping up around March. So, if you're like a go-getter, which I'm sure you guys all are, because you guys all want to do emergency medicine, I would definitely prioritize getting your applications in earlier rather than later. Yeah. and then Iman will talk about the choosing away the programs on the next slide.
All right, so actually, before we get into that, I kind of just want to answer three questions that were in the chat. So, Tenzin, for your first question about the ranking, it's program dependent, unfortunately, but generally speaking, you're supposed to be ranked amongst all the people who are applying that year for residency. So, for example, my first EM rotation was in May. When I asked for the SLO, didn't submit it until closer to when ERAS was opening in September. And that way they were able to like kind of take in all their applicants, decide who was going to fall where on their rank list based off of those rotators, and then submit it. Um, from what I've heard from other friends, that seems to be the common theme, but then other other people could just like throw you for a loop and do it different ways. And then as far as your second question, Tenzin, you get a SLO from your home institution as a sub-I and from your away. So that's two separate SLOs. So correct. Kiara, one per rotation. Um, for the SLO, yes. So basically what Fong had meant earlier was you can only get a single SLO from one program. So my first rotation was at Vassar. I can only get a single SLO from Vassar, but I should aim to have two or three SLOs by the time I submit my application in September. So from two different programs, basically. Um, okay. So centering back on this, choosing away programs to apply to. So there are three types of away programs that you can consider. There's county, community, and academic. Academic are the big places that like the Cornells, that they're very focused into teaching novel concepts that are being introduced, teaching people to be future teachers. Um, Whereas like when you have the county programs, those are the ones that are actually doing a lot more on the grounds work with like the community that they're serving. It actually sounds very close to the community programs as well, but the county programs actually tend to be the more under-resourced programs. So like St. Barnabas was my second rotation, and that one fell kind of in between county and academic. But like they were pretty much a county program because they were serving an underserved population. The second thing that's very important, consider your geography and location. You have to remember that you're auditioning for this program in particular, but also with the way that like the whole ERAS system has been working the last couple of years, you're doing your rotations are sorry, when you're doing your rotations, you're kind of also sending a signal that like this is your geographic preference, right? So I did my two rotations in the state of New York. And in a way, I was kind of like letting everyone know that I was applying to that like, hey, I really want to stay in New York or at least in the Northeast, right? Or if you do like two sub-Is in New York City, then you're kind of sending a signal to, the programs that you apply to that like, I really want to be in a major city. So like that's something you want to consider. And it would be a really good idea to kind of diversify your application and go do a rotation upstate or go do a rotation in like Florida or like any particular region of interest that you really want to send a message that, hey, I want to be out here. Um, how difficult is it to get an away at a specific program you're interested in? Yeah, it's a crapshoot. So there's so many things that go into it. It's first come, first serve. There's geographic diversity. There's underrepresented in in medicine. Um, but also, so for example, like with IMGs, we actually can't use VSLO. So we have to like go directly and find programs that are just willing to take people on outside of the VSLO process, right? So that kind of makes our rotation pool a lot smaller. Um, I'm gonna have a list at the end of like New York programs, New York-based programs that you could reach out to starting now that offer rotations outside of VSLO, and that way you guys like, if there's one that really sticks out, you can reach out to them in the next couple weeks or so. Um, and then are there any standout programs that provide great education slash experiences? So on Reddit, there's like this whole name and fame, name and shame. There's the like Excel spreadsheet. There's a Discord where everyone's kind of contributing and talking about like their experiences at programs. So if you want insight, enter at your own risk. You can actually find out on Reddit. And then, would you recommend I schedule a sub-I or way during the spring? So it depends. From one AP, so many people tell you so many different things. At the end of the day, you kind of want to do what's best for you. One APD said it's too early. They can't really remember students from then. Other people say there aren't really too many people rotating, so you can shine. My first one was in May. I actually really love that experience because the interns were basically second years. So you as a rotating medical student, you are treated like an intern. Like you kind of get more time to show off. When you start doing it, I Fong had mentioned doing it in July. I thought that was the dumbest thing, but the way she explained it is actually so true. I didn't realize that like all the interns are away at their boot camp. So it's another opportunity for you to kind of shine and be treated as an intern. I did my second one in August. It was actually with all the interns joining, it was so much harder to actually get hands on a patient because when like the patients were trickling in, they would just be assigned to the fourth year, the third year, the second year, the first year, and then the med student was like, oh, lower on the priority list. So that's definitely one thing to keep in mind. I agree with the sentiment of like kind of doing it earlier, but that's just me. Again, it's program specific. All right, next slide, please.
All right, so this is kind of more for like non-IMGs. I'm sorry you guys don't get to use VSLO. But VSLO stands for Visiting Student Learning Opportunities. So I would say that, I think there's a lot of chatter about how DOs have a lot of trouble securing aways. So you should have safety nets. But personally, I didn't really find that to be true. I honestly think that like, the early bird gets the worm is like probably the best analogy for how I found my rotations and everything. I think it's just about like, personally you taking the initiative to reach out early. You don't want to be that person that like gets waitlisted to all of your sub-Is and then it's like super stressful because now you're, trying to figure out what you're going to do for your fourth year. You want to kind of set yourself up for success because kind of the summer of third year is when everybody freaks out about step two and level two. So you don't want to put yourself in that position, right? You want to be that person that's like, all right, like all of my stuff for rotations is done. I figured it out. Now it's time for me to get the best standardized test score that I possibly could. And if you're like me and you're not great at it, you need as much time as you can get, right? So that's kind of like my overall general advice. Can we go to the next slide, please? All right. So yeah, just this slide kind of just like summarizes everything. But some things to kind of keep in mind when you're doing the VSLO application is that VSLO charges you a fee about $15 per application. So let's say, for example, I wanted to do a rotation at New York Presbyterian Methodist, right? That's where I did one of my sub-Is. It's $15 to apply for a sub-I there. But I can apply for like August, September, November, whatever I want, and it'll just be $15 um for like that rotation, not necessarily $15 like if I wanted to apply for like the month of August, and then another $15 if I wanted to apply for the month of September. And so essentially like if you have the flexibility, you should apply for as many open slots in your schedule as you can because if you have like I don't know, like the coordinator's like, "Oh, like Fong's busy in August, but um we have a spot for her in September," like because you applied to multiple dates and timelines, it's easier for them to like link you up with a time or an opportunity that they have that's available. Some other things to keep in mind is that even though VSLO will have like a health form for you to fill out, like it's like, those standard health forms, whatever institution you're at, they might actually ask you to do some other supplemental things. So you should try to keep as many like of your health records. Keep them for as long as you can because you never know, like, if they might need this, like, one random titer that you got like 4 years ago, and then, like, now they just want this random thing. So keep that for as long as you can. And then also, some institutions will charge a fee for like their courses. Like I know, like Cornell, I think charged like $100 like per rotation that I had to do, and that's like a separate thing from the sub-I like VSLO application fee. So just keep all those things in mind. I don't want you guys to like be like, oh my gosh, now I have to pay all this extra money. And then also beware of like some programs that will have like the DO tax, which is like, for like an MD, it's like $200, but then for a DO, it's like $4,000. So, do those at your own will. And then also just keep in mind that some programs have timelines. So some programs have a very strict, like you must confirm within 2, 3 weeks. Don't miss your timeline. Some programs have like a probational period where you have, up until like 30 days for you to submit all of your forms, your application, your CV, and all of those things. Be mindful of those timelines and like try to submit them as early as you can so you don't have to think about it. Yeah, I think that's all I got for this slide. Um, so Iman, this is all you, buddy.
Alrighty, let's do this. So, these were some of the questions that people commonly ask before doing rotations. So, some ways actually do give you a residency interview during that rotation month. Again, I'm not sure if like if you do it in May, if that'll definitely be way too early for them to do it. So they'll just invite you back in ERAS season, so like September to December, um, and offer you an interview at that point. Generally speaking, from what I've heard from just about everyone who's done rotations, if you do a rotation at a place, you should be getting an interview. In emergency medicine, differs for other specialties. Um, and then one interesting thing that I hadn't realized was some OAs actually have an end of rotation exam that factors into the SLO. So Brooklyn Methodist, I know, does that for sure. Um, and it's like based off one of the national EM organizations. I think it's like a 50 question test or something like that. Fawn can tell us in a couple of slides. Um, and yeah, so it actually can factor into the SLO. It's just like testing your not emergency medicine like knowledge base and like what you've kind of learned throughout the month of your rotation. The other thing is um a- apparently on VSLO, I wouldn't know, but apparently on VSLO you can see how many sub-I spots are available for each program. Um and I think I had somewhere a link for like the EMRA residency list of programs, like clerkship availabilities. So that's another place you can find it. Housing, fortunately, you kind of need to pay for your own housing, use those student loans. Not much more to say there, honestly. Do you have any advice for experience with the military students who get deferred into civilian programs? Unfortunately, we don't. Um, Best ways to prepare for your sub-Is. Well, there's the EMRA Basics Guide. There's the EM Clerkship podcast. I love that guy, Zach Olson. Oh my God. I like he had these I have a QR code for that too, but he had these links, these tips 1 through 26 of how to succeed on your EM clerkship. I listen to those like at least once a week during my rotation. Really helpful. Um any programs for students that are underrepresented and minority in medicine. I don't know why I keep saying that. We will send a link out for that. I unfortunately did not make a QR code for that one. But there are definitely so many programs that offer diversity scholarship programs. And then how do you find out if a program will genuinely consider DOs and IMGs for residency purposes? Well, you kind of have to look on their website for their the list of their residents for the last 3 years or 4 years, and just look at how many DOs they've taken, how many IMGs they've taken, whether there's anyone from your school that you can like reach out to on Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn, and go from there, honestly. Next slide, please. All right.
Oh, sorry,
There's
sorry. To add to the
oh,
last point, you can actually also go on Residency Explorer, which I discovered a few months ago. It'll tell you like all the stats of like your residency program. So like on average, like how many applicants applied to the program, percentage of admitted from DOs, IMGs, not USMDs, and things like that too. So those are also really great things for you to look at like when you're deciding on where to apply for residency as well. So I thought that was helpful. Maybe you guys will find it helpful too.
honestly, for like a couple of stats they had just seemed a little off on Residency Explorer as far as like, oh, 10% of DOs or like 3% of IMGs make up this program. And I'm like, I know for damn sure there's 40% IMGs in here. But anyways, yeah, Residency Explorer actually updates every year with the previous cycle's statistics in like August. So be on the lookout for that this summer. Here's a list of non-VSLO programs. So in the Bronx, like all these programs, you could reach out to the program coordinator or like whoever their point of contact is on their website and ask to do a rotation there. Um, St. Barnabas and Lincoln in the Bronx, you have Northwell, Staten Island, and Staten Island. In Queens, Jamaica and Flushing is one of those programs that does not have a formal EM residency. So if you rotate here, you will get one of those non-residency SLOs that we were talking about earlier. Um, they actually also have like a Flushing has a PEDS EM rotation for anyone interested in that one. Brooklyn, you have Brooklyn Methodist, you have Maimonides. For IMGs, unfortunately, they only take SGU students. Um, for the rest of us that are IMGs, they won't have anyone else rotate through there directly. That one you have to go on VSLO for. Wyckoff, Brookdale, Downstate had said at one of the virtual symposiums that I'd attended last year that like if you reach out to them, they could try to help you. I actually didn't reach out, so that's why I put a question mark there. In Long Island, you have Nassau University Medical Center, and you have the two Good Sams that will take rotators just by emailing them. Upstate New York, uh, Vassar Brothers Medical Center in Poughkeepsie, Garnett in Middletown, SUNY Upstate in Syracuse. He's another one who said to email him directly. SUNY Rochester, Arno Ogden, and Elmira. Uh, for them, the portal or like you can start emailing them after April 15th of this year. I found on their website. In New Jersey, you kind of have to just start emailing random programs. In Connecticut, you can't really rotate at any of those places outside of VSLO, with the exception of Yale has this very specific rule for non-citizen IMG, non-US citizen IMGs that they can apply to do rotations at Yale, but it costs like $4,000 to do so. Do it at your own comfort, I suppose, if you can afford $4,000. Otherwise, for completion's sake, I just wanted to throw out a couple of these programs. There's one in Pennsylvania, Conemaugh. Their program director is actually like on Discord, on Twitter/X. And like he is a huge saint and helps out the entire EM community. So like shout out to him. I wanted to mention his program on there. In Rhode Island, there's Kent Hospital. In Chicago, there's Mount Sinai. And California, Kern Medical Center, they also take people outside of VSLO. Yeah. All right, next slide, please. All right, so now we're going to talk about our experiences. I quickly just want to mention that link in the top right is for anyone who does not have a home institution, and by default, they don't have someone who can guide them through the residency process. You can sign up for a resident mentor through ASAP and EMRA. So I just wanted to share that link there. The biggest thing that has helped me along this journey was just having someone who was mentoring me, advocating for me, and kind of like just telling me where to go from here. Because again, you're going to hear like over the course of this year, you're going to hear 10,000 people giving you 50,000 pieces of advice, and you'll be confused every step of the way. But if you have one person that you can actually trust and connect with, then you kind of can just like lean on their advice. With that being said, Fong, do you want to start telling more about your experiences?
Yeah, so I can tell you guys about my sub-Is and you can ask me anything you want. But my home, like third year institution was Brookdale. So I did that one in March and they were gracious enough to write me a slow. So yeah, you can do it in March if you want to, and I did it and I don't have any regrets. And then I did for my aways, I did Brooklyn Methodist in August, and then I did SIUH in September. That's Staten Island University Hospital. And then I also did a simulation elective, a wilderness medicine, and EMS elective. And right now I'm doing ultrasound at Methodist again. So if you guys have any questions about any of those, feel free to like ask me whatever you want. Yeah, I don't know. I really liked my sub-Is. I honestly think I'm like kind of bored right now. I'm not really doing much. But yeah, it was definitely a tiring time, a stressful time. Personally, I didn't take step two until I finished all of my sub-Is. If you guys can take it before, I think it definitely makes your sub-I experience way less stressful and way more fun. Um, so that's kind of what I think. And yeah, I think everyone's going to try to give you a bunch of advice, and you should listen to the advice that you feel like would work well for you best, which I know isn't really like good advice, but at the end of the day, it's like your application. It's like what you think is right, and no one really has like the best answer for you. But yeah, definitely getting a mentor. And I think some of the sub-Is, they will actually set you up with a student or resident mentor. So you can like also meet mentors through your sub-Is at various institutions. My mentor was amazing. They looked at my personal statement. They were like, this is not good. Don't write this, include this. And other people were like, you're doing too many things. Like, you should stop doing emergency medicine and spread your wings and do other things. So that's kind of like the advice that I got. Um, yeah, we can go to the next slide.
Oh wait, well, I haven't shared the rest of my experience, but Bong, very quick. Someone was asking, how was the ultrasound and wilderness experience?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so the ultrasound right now is a 2-week elective at Brooklyn Methodist. Um, I'm pretty bad at ultrasound, I will say, but I will say I have gotten much better at echoes after doing like a thousand in 2 weeks. And the residents and fellows at Methodist are amazing. They're so nice and they're constantly pimping me. So, I did learn a thing or two. And then wilderness medicine is a combined rotation with EMS at Maimonides. So that was really awesome. We actually ended up doing a upstate like kind of retreat where we utilize all the fun things that we learned in our wilderness medicine lectures, and we ran a bunch of like simulation scenarios. So I highly recommend doing like EM related subspecialties and electives if you can. I think it's just like a really fun way and like so not stressful. Like after doing a sub-I, switching to like ultrasound or sim is like a walk in the park. Like they're very nice and like they don't expect that much from you. So it was honestly like a really great experience, and I would totally do it again. And I encourage you guys all to at least do ultrasound or simulation if you're interested in EM. I think if you kind of know how things work and like dig a little deeper, it'll make you a stronger clinician when you're an intern.
Okay, so David, really quick to answer your question, what info can you see on your completed SLOEs? Um, you shouldn't see anything on your SLO. So on ERAS, they give you the option, kind of like when we were applying to med school. Do you waive your right to see this letter? You should be checking yes. Apparently, like it doesn't look good if you check no. Again, same as when we were applying to med school.
Yeah, do not.
Um,
You have to waive it. They will not like you have to waive it.
yeah,
Yeah,
so
that's like one advice that I think you should definitely take from us.
from everyone, whoever tells you to not waive it, they're not looking out for you in your best interest. Um, so yeah, you shouldn't see anything on your SLO, basically. Okay, so my experiences, like I said, I did my first EM rotation up in Poughkeepsie in May. I did my second one at St. Barnabas in the Bronx in August, and I actually took step two at the end of August, right after I finished my second EM rotation. I will echo what Fong said. When you start leaving it that close to the deadline, it gets really stressful. Um, Doing it like in hindsight, I'd probably do it right before that second EM rotation. But like I still really think that doing those two EM rotations and then taking step two helped out tremendously because I was able to like learn so many things in person that I was able to apply for the test. But also that test like just asks sometimes random gibberish. So you can never win with the NBME people, or NBOME people for the DOs. Um, Anyways, I actually did not do any subspecialty rotations. It was really hard for me to get a hand on any of them. But they do exist again at these programs. You can kind of read on the previous slide, you can reach out to any of them and see what options are available. Um, As far as can you get an observership as a US IMG graduate, definitely ask programs. I think SUNY Upstate is one of those who had mentioned last year, the program director, he mentioned that he is willing to have people come on a case by case basis. So just email random people. That's actually the other thing. 2 years ago, when I started doing all the background work, I would email someone and they'd say, no, not possible at all. Then I'd email someone else and they say, oh, I think we can make it work. And then they look into it. So like just because one person said no doesn't fully mean that it's a no. Just like try asking someone else a month later or something and see what changes down the line. Um, and then which ones did you answer in the chat? When should we apply for electives after we apply to our sub-I? Um, you can I think that's like a case by case basis depending on your school, Rebecca. As for when you can apply for electives in general. Um, that like clerkship book that I had shared earlier, the purple book, they have a bunch of chapters and they actually talk about like other EM specific electives you can consider, like ophthalmology, doing an ICU elective, just to kind of like get prepared for residency, but also have fun. Pick like really fun electives that you may never get a chance to see again in the future. Um, elective SLOEs are not required, Tenzin. You should ideally your slow should be coming from the actual EM sub-I experience. So like unless you have difficulties getting those e-slows, then you can pivot to some of the elective slows or the non-residency slows or an O-slow. But like ideally you should try to get the main ones from the main rotation. I actually um had an O-slow from my surgery clerkship director because like we do 12 weeks of surgery clerkship. And that was my third letter because like some programs, they actually ask for you to have a minimum of 3 letters of recommendation is what they say on their website. So that's just like something to keep in mind. If you only do 2 slows, you might need a third letter. You can get it from the elective slow, you can get it from O slow or some other alternative. All right. Next slide, please. Oh wait, getting great slow, some tips. Yeah. So some of the big things, you want to make sure you're taking ownership of your patients. It's not about how many patients you're seeing, but it's about the quality of work that you're showing. Are you following up on your patients? Are your presentations improving? Is your knowledge gap something that is also improving where like you can come up with a very sophisticated differential diagnosis? Um, the EM Clerkship podcast I talked about, he talks about this snowy blizzard approach for how to present a case. Other people talk about like for the differential diagnosis having a spit mnemonic, so like most serious, the most probable, the most interesting, and then like treatments. Just like look into things like that and practice your like elevator pitch for like when you're presenting patients. Um, the other thing is show interest in learning, show interest in seeing procedures, if possible, ask to do a procedure, learn IVs, especially when you're rotating in a New York City program, where like, it's hard to find someone to help you to get IV access on a patient. And then also make sure you're being a team player. The biggest thing, as Joey's saying down there, don't lie. Like EM attendings hate it when you lie. If they ask you something point blank, even if you even if you don't want to look bad, tell the truth. If they said, "Did you ask the patient for their medical medication, like their list of medications?" Don't say, "Yeah," or like, "Does the patient have chest pain?" and you forgot to ask. Don't say, "No, they don't have chest pain." Like, be honest about it. Even if they like ask you 5 straight questions that make you look bad, trust me, you'll look worse if they find out that you lied to them. Um, and sometimes people ask like, "Oh, well, what if the patient tells a different story when the attending goes? Like then they're gonna think I lied." Attendings have been practicing for a while. They can like see the nuance. Patients will change their story depending on each person who asks them at the next step. Like you can go back after the attending and then the patient will tell you an entirely different story than what they told the attending. So like they won't think you're lying in that case. Fong, you want to jump in, add anything else?
I've personally been a victim of the multiple emotionally manipulative patients, so you are not alone. Your patients will lie to you and the resident and the attending, and it is fine. It happens, and like you're doing emergency medicine. Not every patient that you see will be like a great patient or a grateful patient, that is. So don't worry about that. And yes, I will totally echo like the not lying part. Like sometimes the attending will be like, okay, like is the foot swollen? And like you're like, oh crap, I forgot to ask. Like just say that. Like they don't care. Like most of the time they're like, yeah, I would forget too. Or like they'll ask like, oh, like do they have any allergies? And like, we forget to ask sometimes. It's fine. Like just be like, I don't know. I can go back and ask, no problem. But yeah, honesty is like a really important part about emergency medicine because trust once it's broken is really hard to regain. And oftentimes you won't really work with the attending over and over again. But if he's like, oh, like she's the med student that lied that one time, that might affect how other people feel about working with you. So you actually lose nothing by being honest, and you lose everything if you lie, even if it's an accidental or whatever. Something else that I think is really important is that, like, at the end of the day, like we're med students, we're not expected to be the doctor. We don't know everything, and that's okay. Like, I honestly think that, like, for me, like, I'm not the smartest person in the room. I don't expect myself to be, and I don't really care to be. So, what I do is, like, I try to spend as much time with my patients as possible. I try to get the best HPI as possible. And I also try to make sure that, like, they're most comfortable when after they've seen me, right? Um, so this means like little things like if they're cold, I'll give them a blanket. If they're hungry and like they're not NPO, I will actually personally just go get them a sandwich and things like that. I understand it's not like in our job description, and some people will say like you're not really learning anything by like getting them a sandwich and things like that. But I actually think that it really does matter. And, if you are kind to your patients and you're kind to the people that you work with, that'll actually translate through your slow. And a lot of people will comment and say, like, this person is like a really compassionate person. This person is a team player. You don't want to be like that med student that like ignores the nurses and is like mean to the custodian. You want to be that med student that everyone's like, oh yeah, like that person was super friendly, super nice. And like that'll actually really, pave the way for you. And so I don't know. I wrote the last part, like make everyone your friend because you never know, like when you desperately need a blanket and the custodian's like, I got you, like I'll hook you up, and then you're golden because maybe your patient's irritated because they're cold, and then you kind of save the day, right? And yeah, totally echoing what Eamon said, like take ownership of your patient. So oftentimes I feel like med students will just present the patient and then they'll be like, okay, like I'm good, I'm gonna go see the next patient. It shows a lot of growth when you monitor your patient. So let's say somebody comes in with a chest complaint and you give this amazing presentation. You tell your attending like all the labs you want to do and like the plans and whatever. Like you should periodically go check on your patient and see how they're doing and report back because status updates do matter, right? How many, like, sometimes you see like asthmatic patients and then the treatment is like you do nebs. It's really helpful for your resident if you go and check on every few hours and see like, hey, I think the wheezing has gone down. I think this patient could actually be discharged now if you want to come and listen, and then I can help you discharge the patient. Or just be like, hey, like, we gave him two nebs. I think he's still wheezing. Like, maybe we can give another one or two. Like, that will really help your residents, and then that'll translate into you getting a really great evaluation. So just thinking about all of those things too, and being mindful of like how you can be the most helpful person to your residents, to your team that day. I think that's all I have. Sorry, I kind of mumbled.
All right, so different resources to consider. Okay, so EM Clerkship Podcast is that one on the right. Definitely take a look at their website for all those episodes against Snowy Blizzard, like all the different tips and tricks that Olson shared. Um, on the left, Emra has a list of resources for um, things that students can look at. You don't have to use all of them, but like here are a couple of the big ones. Trauma shears. Always have trauma shears on hand. Um, you look like a rock star when you like pull out your trauma shears from your scrubs and just hand it to the nurse, or like just start helping and cutting off the patient. Well, you should make sure that it's okay to cut off the patient's clothes. If we can remove them, that is definitely the ideal situation. But when the situation calls for it, You're prepared. The EMRA booklets, like this Basics of Emergency Medicine book. So if you sign up for an EMRA membership, it's $70 for a year. I know it's a lot for us medical students, but they send you this like a chunk of little books that are very helpful for when you're on your rotation. This one is like very thin and flimsy. It's like 10 pages long. Actually 25, like 13 sheets. Anyways, but like it goes through some of the quick and dirty little tips and tricks to remember for like headaches, right? Like rashes, like all these different organ systems. Um, my personal favorite was the Pocket Emergency Medicine book. That one like goes into detail for like, oh, well, if you're thinking about appendicitis, you should think about the Alvarado, like the air score. There and then like for DVT and PE, it tells you like, oh, well, you should think about the Wells and the Wells score and the Perk rule, as well. And then it tells you like what the criteria is for that. So if you ever forget on shift, like, what do I do for a DVT, right? And you're like rotating at an academic center and you really want to show off, that book is like perfection. And it tells you like treatments, so like antibiotics. Um, yeah, so like I think those two books were some of the big ones that I had with me in my pocket at all times. Again, EM clerkship, course, podcast, perfect guy. AMBOSS and MRAP. I actually didn't really use a lot of MRAP during my rotations. I was studying for step two, so I was using like Divine Intervention podcasts instead. But AMBOSS questions really helpful. I think Emra in their resources has the 3-minute EM med student presentation. Um, so that one kind of goes into what I was talking earlier about like practice presenting patients before you do your EM rotation. It should be like a quick thing that's structured differently from the internal medicine presentations or like surgery presentations or anything like that. Um, and then on the next slide, I have a bunch of like resources. Whoa. All right, there we go. Um, so again, that purple book I shared earlier, this is a list of things that they suggested students can use for success. I think I used like 5 of these things in total. Um, yeah. But like the most important thing are things I wrote here. Make sure you have these 5 apps downloaded on your phone. Fractures app, Suture app, and Nerve Block app. Oh my goodness. You would not believe how amazing the Suture app is. Like if you I still to this day don't know like, oh, 60, 405, like what do I do with each one? You can open the Suture app and it like lets you pick the different body part that's affected, whether it's like a linear laceration, a curved laceration, like irregular laceration, how deep it is, and then it tells you exactly what suture you need, and then it kind of gives you like a 30-second YouTube clip of like how to suture it up. Like what kind of technique you should be doing. Perfect app. Um, and like fractures, it tells you like how to splint it. MD Calc, everyone knows about that one. Make sure you have it so you can calculate all your scores. And then Wiki EM is kind of like the portable version of the Pocket Emergency Medicine book I recommended earlier. Fong, anything to add? Or I guess we can go on to the next question with the open forum.
Yeah, I would actually also say like MD Calc is a great app to have, but what's more impressive is if you know what tests to order. So it's really important for you guys to like be really well versed in like knowing your perk, your wells, and then also like the nexus, I think is really important. So if you have a patient coming in with like traumatic head injury, like to know if you want to scan or not scan is really important. And you'll definitely super impress your attendings if you're like based on the Nexus scale or whatever, then they'll be like, ooh, like this person knows their stuff. And then, yeah, to echo what Iman said, if you're presenting a laceration and you want to do it, you sound so much better if you're like, okay, this person has, a laceration on their wrist. I think I'm going to use like the 5, the 5-0. non-absorbable and then have them return to office within a week to have it removed, they're more likely to let you do the procedure because you're like, oh wow, like this person like knows their stuff. Like they know exactly what to do, they know the plan. And so then you're more likely to get like, more procedures in with that attending. And so then it's kind of like a win-win for you. So just be a little bit more prepared with those things and then you'll thank yourself later.
All right. So if anyone has any questions, you can let us know. I'm going to start answering the last two that weren't answered down here in the chat. So any recommendations for US IMG to strengthen your application? Um, Again, as far as like doing the actual sub-Is, it's that list that I shared, but I think you can also reach out to those people for doing an observership. Um, SUNY Upstate again is one of the big ones that I know has offered to help for observerships, but it's kind of one that you just have to reach out to a bunch of different people. Um, and then how many sub-I programs per block should you apply for? It's not a per block thing. It's just in throughout the course of a fourth year, you want to make sure that you're doing 2 to 3 max of sub-Is. Um, Once you start doing more than three, it kind of starts to look bad if you're sending four sub-I, four slows, because they think that like you're taking opportunities away from students who otherwise would not be able to do rotations. And also it can backfire. Like in theory, you should be doing better on your second one compared to your first, and then better on your third compared to your second. But like after a while, you get burnt out. Like my first sub-I, I was doing, it was actually the most intense, one of the most intense rotations I did. We did like 18 12-hour shifts in the course of a month. My second, that's an anomaly. Usually it's like 10 to 12 rotations in a month. But like even with that, you actually get burnt out really quickly, especially if you're studying for step two, doing your ERAS application, all these different things. Yeah, try to cap yourself at three sub-Is during the course of your fourth year.
Also, like if you guys are applying to like multiple sub-I programs per block, like that's fine if like let's say like I applied to a bunch in July through September because I know those were like really busy months and like whoever accepted me first, I just took it. And then I immediately went on VSLO or whatever platform and I pulled my application from other programs. That's just like the ethical thing and that's what I was told to do. That way programs are like, okay, no hard feelings, like she found her rotations like and that way, like, you're not kind of like taking up people's spots, right? Because that would be kind of unkind if you're like holding on to a spot and someone else really wanted it and you're holding it on for another program. So as soon as that block kind of fills up for you and you've been accepted to one program, you should withdraw from all the other programs that you applied for your sub-I. And yeah, I can't echo what Iman said. Like, do not do 5 sub-Is. You do not need to do 5 sub-Is. I don't know who needs to like hear this, but like please hear me now. Like you do not need to do 5. You'll be so tired. You're not even going to want to interview. And interview season is so tiring that you want to like kind of give yourself a little time to like decompress and just like rot on your couch for a few days or weeks or months. I did.
Oh,
But you don't need to do 5. Just do like 2 or 3. If you really want, you can do 4. I don't know. But don't do too much. You'll get really tired and you're not going to want to do anything else after that. And you still have other rotations you need to finish as your graduation requirement. So,
actually, really quickly echoing that last part, Pong. After step two, it's okay to allow yourself to brain rot for some time. Like you can do a chill rotation for the month after step two and just like decompress. Don't even open a text. Don't even like open an app or anything educational and like just relax. And definitely after you match, relax, right? Like you don't have to go in and start studying for like boards or like for first day of residency. Reward yourself and like yeah, it's okay to enjoy some brain rot material after passing your step complex exam. Yeah.
Also, just to like reiterate, you should not do sub-Is in November or December because if you have a bunch of interviews scheduled then, it looks really bad if you take days off to do those interviews. And then once you start like, going back and forth with the coordinator, that might not work in your favor. So definitely just kind of avoid, I feel like November, December, January, those are not months that I would say are prime months for sub-Is because if you have a lot of interviews, that might make you like really tired and also scheduling wise, it might be hard to do a sub-I then. But yeah, other than that, I don't think I have anything else. I don't know about you guys.
Yep, doesn't look like anyone's asking any other questions. If there are no other questions, we can go on to that last slide. And guys, keep in touch with us. You can find us on Instagram at New York EMSC. You can email us for anything. Um, and yeah, just stay tuned for what's to come.
Thank you.